Big calm from small changes. Yes, it's possible and it can happen starting today. So, we're talking about how small shifts or micro changes actually can create huge changes in your child's behavior, your family ecosystem. You can move from that chaos, dysregulation to calm. People come to me from all over the world. I've been doing this for 3 decades, and I've been guilty of this myself. We're all kind of chasing down the one, the thing, the treatment. What's going to help your kid, whether they're unfocused at school, they're irritable, anxious, avoidant, sensory processing, they have clinical diagnoses like you know um, ADHD, anxiety, they're neurodivergent, whatever the heck's going on. We all want our kids to experience less symptoms, and that's awesome and that's amazing, and we definitely can work on that. But I think what sort of happened is this culture of, guess what? There's something that's gonna fix my kid. You've heard me talk about it. People come in and they're like, "Hey, Dr. Rowe, frankly, help my, neighbor Betty, her kid, quote unquote, have a miracle." And what does that mean? It means that, the symptoms got completely under control. There was a big shift. And people think it's one thing. I mean, when we work one to one with people, it's a comprehensive program. I mean, it's 6 months and we're making changes. And it all starts with micro changes. And yes, we have brain tools. Yes, we have lots of amazing things. Remember, it doesn't matter where you are entering in the point of working with me, whether it's my books, whether it's one of our, great courses. I have all kinds of things, or it's our, I have it on right now. It's our COM PMF. Hold on, I got to get it. Our COM PMF, or neurofeedback, doesn't matter. We're all about regulating that nervous system. And, these issues that you have very likely didn't happen overnight. Even when I have my PANS-PANDAS kids, which I have a PANS kid, you know, these changes sort of creep up, right? There can be soft signs. So why is it so important to focus on micro steps, right? And there's so many different ones that you can take. And how do you know? I'm going to talk a lot about this in my book, which my, Tough as Nails editor said it was so good that she didn't want to put it down. And that she shared it with her wife and said, can you imagine if we had this book before? It's all about nervous system regulation. So micro steps, right, are those little things that you do that actually help you and your child regain control, right? A lot of our behaviors that our kids are doing on autopilot, right? Kids don't really do a lot of things on purpose. They do things because that's their brain and the way they formed a habit. What it does is that when we feel out of control, we're going to take control any way we can, right? So when we shift to a micro step mentality, right? So a micro step mentality means that I can celebrate, I can acknowledge, my brain will see the little steps, right? And instead of only the top of the mountain, right, getting to the summit is success. And that is something that I have to help so many people with. And so we not only have to shift, right, that these little things that we can do, the little things we can say, micro steps, make a huge difference in our kids, but we also have to shift our mindset that there are many wins, right? I recently was out with a group of moms and we were just, like talking about that, how hard it's been. And, with friendships and different people understanding, right? Because we each had a kid that really had a mental health issue. Didn't matter, all different reasons, by the way, right? And that we had all been abandoned by our friends, right? Including me. You heard me, my story, my best friend abandoned me. And, send Jesus to pray for her, even though she's not a Christian. Um, you should always pray for people. It's very healing. But one of the things that we were talking about was how we could acknowledge and celebrate our kids' wins, but we couldn't talk about it with other people because other people would look at us like we're crazy. And she was sharing a story of basically, her kid was really kind of getting out of control and was always getting um, speeding tickets, driving. It's a long story. And every time they get a speeding ticket, it would lead to, and we live in these backcountry roads out here, just so everybody knows, pretty easy to get tickets. And, because the speed limit's like 20 miles an hour, right? Literally. So I'm not encouraging speeding, even though I do look at the speed limit as a suggestion. That's what I'm just saying. But what happened was he would just have these meltdowns. He would get a ticket and he'd melt down and actually lead to a full destabilization. So she said, I got a speeding ticket in the mail, and I can only share this with you guys. He didn't even tell me about it. And, it was like nothing had happened. He had built a stress tolerance, and they weren't happening with a high frequency at this point anymore. But she was like, if I said this to any other person but you girls, everybody would think that I'm crazy. And I was like, girl, this is a huge deal, right? And so we can look at our micro steps. We're not lowering our expectations. In fact, very clear about the expectations. She worked really hard for him to build stress tolerance. And that was a reflection of that, right? So what happens with micro steps, right? What the heck are you talking about, Dr. Rowe? What are these micro steps? We're going to get into that. But let's talk about this neuroscience of micro steps and why they're so powerful, right? So number one, we're shifting our mindset that the idea that only the completion, the winning, whatever you want to call it, is the win. We are shifting that, right? And when we help our child really gain success in micro steps, there are a couple major things that happen. Number one, it builds confidence, right? So if we have little bits of success, and we're not going to be there like a cheerleader, like, oh my gosh, rah, rah, rah. That mom wasn't like, oh, I'm so glad you got a speeding ticket and didn't tell me. She just internalized it. And she was like, wow, there's a shift here. And so when we have little successes, we can structure this, we can build this out, we can do all these things. Your child really can feel more confident. And if you are not feeling good about yourself, if it doesn't matter how much, as an adult, we understand this, how much wealth you have, how much, your degree, your job, whatever. If you're not feeling good about yourself, it's not going to lead to other positive things. Success builds success, right? You need confidence in doing things. It just doesn't develop overnight. And if your kid's been struggling a long time, like my kid doesn't know a world, having gotten, bitten by a tick at 22 months, doesn't know a world where he doesn't experience distress. It's not in his recollection, right? And so it's just very different, right? I think people understand that who have kids like that. So the other major thing that happens is the brain starts to form a habit. Like, oh, the more I do this, this happens, right? So, you're getting, neurotransmitter flooding, right? Your brain is actually identifying what it's supposed to do because we always tell people, don't do this, do that, all these other things. But when it experiences its own success, right, and it leads to better self regulation, better identification, self tolerance. And this is huge, right? Because many of us are stuck in this kind of like, rescue, 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 rescue all the time with our kids. And there's times we need to rescue. But when we create a dependence, right? Oh, my kid's unfocused, so I have to set everything up for them. How are they going to know how to focus if you are setting it up the entire time? They're not. There's a way to structure it. So what does it look like in the real world when we're starting to do micro steps? You heard me talk about some of those things, right? So number one, again, we're shifting to acknowledging those little successes. And little successes are even brain starts to form a habit. Like, oh, the more I attempts to do it, right? So mom, I got angry, but I stopped myself real quick. That's a success. Okay. How did you do that? Amy, what happened? Like, wow, that was great. I noticed that. And that was a lot easier for you. Yeah. And kids will say things like, yeah, it kind of was a little easier. Now, these are dialogues. These micro steps are shifts that have to happen on a regular basis, right? Other ways of micro steps, right? So shifting from a proactive instead of a reactive, I should say shifting to a proactive instead of reactive. So when we start shifting from reactive to proactive, we are doing things in advance of a breakdown. And that means you are spending 5 minutes a day in the morning doing a trampoline or sitting down and listening to music with your teenager or something, driving to school. And then that's, you're listening to meditation, whatever is going on. You're implementing strategies that regulate the nervous system and you're making that part of your day. Regulating the nervous system should be like brushing your teeth, right? You see me right now, I got my PEMF on, but I also did a bunch of other things today. So, including going for a walk real quick. You have to really be proactive in order to help. These are micro steps that really help to shift. One of the biggest mistakes people make is that they therapy chase. And in the world of micro steps, you want to use proven strategies. You want to do things that, are scientifically proven. Everything that I'm talking about, everything that I do on this show are all science backed solutions. So you can feel good about it. They're in our dysregulation solution. And by the way, if you want more help, you can go to drroseann.com/help. That's our solution matcher. It's going to match you to the right solution to where you're at. And there's all kinds of things at every level for where people are at. You've got to take action. And so when people are using these proven strategies, they tend to move away too quickly from things that are actually working. I'm actually in shock. Sometimes people are like, how long do I get to take these supplements for? And I'm like, did this magnesium like dramatically change your life? Like, why would you stop it? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, it's working. Just lean into it. Like you're worried about a school trip, give them extra, whatever it is. I'm not saying that for everybody. It's just, using as an analogy. So sticking with the things that work. And also when you have normal stuff, right? Some of our dysregulated kids, like every kid dysregulates. There is not a kid that doesn't dysregulate, okay? It's just some people struggle with it more, right? Sometimes there's a clinical issue behind it. Sometimes there's a whole dysregulated family behind it and inherited patterns of behavior. So biggest takeaway is start implementing and recognizing micro changes, right? So in your child, support those micro steps, but also ask yourself what proactive technique, method that you can use to help your child today.